And hello, everybody. It's Monday night. We're all live here in my little corner of YouTube land. Let's all face front. What we've got here is a debut for me, a debut that's probably the most, racy piece I've ever done. The one and only Dejah Thoris, if I'm pronouncing her name correctly, the titular princess of Mars from the great John Carter series of books from the writer who also created Tarzan, Edgar Rice Burroughs. So you see here, there she is on her little throne in her little palace in Mars. Nice little up and down shot showing off the scale of everything I did in pencil in her little throne room, tile floor, strange little throne with pillow, curtains, and the detail of Mars behind her, as you can see. So what we've got is Earth up there, actually, instead of Mars. So what we're going to be seeing is a little different from what I've been doing, a little more detail, but not quite that different, but definitely more racy. And for all of those out there that are returning viewers, introduce yourselves in the chat. And also, if you are a brand new viewer, also introduce yourself. And returning and new viewers, stick around. We'll be here for the next hour. And of course, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. So what we've all going to start with is how I always start, which is with the face of the character I'm doing. We've got Mildred has introduced herself, and also Nick in the chat. Hello, Luke, and everyone. From Nick. Oh, nice. We've got our usual people in there. We have Christopher Tardis in the chat. No, not quite yet. So what we're going to do is start with her eyebrows. And since this is of a rendering of a pose I came up with myself instead of trying to specifically imitate a style, so I'm not beholden to the kind of technique that other artists would use, like I was when I was rendering Abby from Danger Girl or Fairchild from Gen 13, where I'm specifically trying to do the J. Scott Campbell way of things. So here I'm going to give her darker, thinner, more mercurial eyebrows. Yep, we've got Scotchy Scotch over from Christopher's side of the chat. And actually, specifically, a little fun fact, this post I came up with for this piece of Princess Thoris was actually done from a photo of Elle Macpherson's Playboy spread. And then just based everything we've seen here on that pose. Although, of course, she may be scantily clad, but she's still not, completely naked. Jewel encrusted, I would say. Like she is the titular character from the first John Carter book. And in there, everybody on Mars was naked except for maybe some jewels on them or some veils. So I'm following the source material as much as I can without, getting any kind of content violation with nudity. Although supposedly, yes, in the later John Carter books, John Carter himself would return to Mars through astral projection. And since astral projections, according to Burroughs, don't wear clothes, he would return to Mars naked and be, like everyone else on the planet. Mr. Scotch, Mrs. Boxed Wine, and me, Mr. Diet Coke. Nick's referring to himself as Mr. Diet Coke, Christopher as Mr. Scotch, and Mildred as Mrs. Boxed Wine. Here we go. We got the first little bit on her intricate crown, but I'm a little ahead of myself. Let's go and take a number 2 pen to do those eyelids. One technique I've taken from, I just chose to do from J. Scott Campbell's rendering of comic book women is that little extra eyelid. Adds a little more depth. There we go. Now we've got that eyelash. Trying to make her look a little more foreign. A little more exotic, since she may be humanoid of a very attractive kind, but she's still a Martian woman, so right there. If you want to see further proof, actually have right here. This is the color drawing of Dejah Thoris that I drew earlier in the day. And her skin tone was done with rose salmon out of my Copic marker collection. That's a lot more scantily clad. But Nick asks, so what's this character from? Dejah Thoris is the Princess of Mars from the John Carter of Mars novels that has existed in the comic book world for a very long time. The comic book license for John Carter has passed around. It started off at Marvel in the 70s, after Marvel had made bank with taking the Conan the Barbarian stories and making a comic series out of that. They then went and got the rights to do John Carter and did that for a while. And I think issue 17 of John Carter of Mars was the first published comic book work that Frank Miller ever drew. And now Dynamite Entertainment, they're the publisher that has had the rights to John Carter and all related characters for the longest time now. And they've, of course, done several series on Dejah Thoris. Right here, she's the Princess of Mars. And not quite, doesn't exactly have shame about her figure. Or at least that's what I see when I see a princess dressed like this. Then again, if you're I don't think I've said before, but I do say here on this channel, which I've never said before, that if a woman has the body to actually really pull off an outfit like this, then okay, more power to them. They legitimately look good wearing something like this. It's only fiction. We're not talking about real people here. It's my favorite quote from Brian Boland is, they just have to. It doesn't matter if it looks like something a real person would wear. They just have to look good on the page. When describing his rendering of a DC character called Lady Blackhawk. And hey, it's equal opportunity because she has these giant Martian monster bodyguards, and they're all these 6-foot beasts, and they're all totally naked too. So she's the Princess Thoris is not alone. Doing her little. There we go. Now, and plug in something there. Just charging up the camera, and now, yes, I think the makeup for the lack of real clothing that she has, that's why giving her this crown that is so intricate and all these little Art Nouveau flourishes of intricate wires is why they came up with it, to compensate. To give the artists something else to do, since you've got a figure that's so scantily clad. At least here, she's, her own person, her own character. Like, especially when in the 60s they reprinted the John Carter books with the great Frank Frazetta doing the painting the covers, where she was there with the typical fantasy cover pose of the sexy, scantily clad lady crouching at the feet of the buff man. I've never read anything from Frank Miller, but that will change tonight when I read Daredevil. Yeah, that's why the Frank Miller Daredevil stuff is one of the first big superhero comics I would recommend. I mean, that's why I was proud to have owned it before, and why it's on my Amazon wish list, and why I beat myself up every day for having ever sold my copy of the Marvel Omnibus of Frank Miller's Daredevil stuff. The first year it came out was not too long after the Ben Affleck movie. This character sure likes to show a lot of skin, says Nick. They must not be shy on Mars. Well, I think because in Edgar Rice Burroughs' mind, because what we're able to see of Mars looked like deserts. I'm guessing he must have thought that, oh, it's really, really hot over there, so of course the people of Mars would all be naked. There's a detail about Martian life that they left out of the John Carter movie from 2012. They, Christopher thinks she's very hot. Well, that's I'm not sure if that's either a compliment on the character it's herself or on how my ability is at drawing her. I think that the best artists at doing attractive women like this, it's a combination of how the character is designed and also the artist ability. So when you see a very particularly sexy cover of a Dejah Thoris comic that they get Frank Cho or Adam Hughes or J. Scott Campbell to draw, then it's a matter of the character's perennial sex appeal mixed with an artist who really knows how to bring it out. I'll probably track something down to look if he ever rendered anything, but he's been dead for about a decade now, but he was, I would say in the 80s, the perennial artist at drawing attractive women in comics, although he didn't do that much comic work, was Dave Stevens, who created The Rocketeer, and was also he also did a lot of great pinup work. He even actually was offered to take over being the pinup painter for Playboy, but turned them down. And in The Rocketeer, there's the girlfriend was directly built on the likeness of Betty Page, and the overnight indie popularity of The Rocketeer is what helped lead to Betty Page getting a resurgence in her notoriety in the 1980s, along with the woman who did wind up taking over painting the pinups in Playboy, Olivia de Berardini, if I'm pronouncing her name correctly. There was even a nice photo, an old photo she posted on her Instagram page of her at Golden Apple Comics in California. That's the comic book shop at least in the state of California, if not the West Coast. And there was a joint signing that they were doing where it was her and Dave Stevens in the 90s when the Rocketeer movie was coming out. So Stevens, of course, the popularity and going on the con circuit promoting his work went, into the stratosphere. Since for when it comes to Hollywood movies of comic books that weren't, Marvel or DC, the real peak time for that was the 90s when you had The Mask, and then you had Spawn, and you had even Faust was another one that's even far more obscure than any of those other ones, but still counts. There were all these non-mainstream publisher superheroes that were all getting greenlit. And the paradox about the John Carter film from 2012 that tanked was that along with Edgar S. Burroughs' other character Tarzan were such benchmarks, were so embedded into the bedrock of fantasy fiction that we see today, and fiction in general that we see today, that trying to do a new present day movie of it was now paradoxically seems derivative, like a Ghost in the Shell, with or without the whitewash casting. You still have Ghost in the Shell was a film so influential, the manga and the anime film, that trying to do a Hollywood movie of it 20 years after the fact, now it seems derivative compared to all the other major films that have come out that took direction from Ghost in the Shell, the original anime movie. And so many of the tropes and plot devices and characterizations that you see in the John Carter books were, standardized by all the fantasy fiction that came after it. You wound up making it look commonplace in doing a $200 million Disney movie in the year 2012. That's why it honestly wasn't really that much of a surprise that opening weekend it lost at the box office to 21 Jump Street. Even though by comparison, 21 Jump Street was also something that was derivative. You have, not just it's a a movie based on a TV show, but you have specifically a movie based on a show that's doing all of this winking to the camera, making fun of the tropes of the original series that's based on, which had been around since the 90s, since the Brady Bunch movies did that, where it made it as like a gag where you have the Bradys still acting the way they did in the 1970s and dressing in the way they are in the 70s. Their house looks the same way, but they're doing all this in the context of actually living in LA in 1995. And that was the central gag of those two films. I agree. Mildred wants me to read her comments not just your favorites. Well, besides Christopher thinking that Princess Thoris here is very hot, Mildred wants me to say that fiction creates friction. And Christopher also agrees that Nick is the teacher's pet. I don't think so. Imagine I've seen some videos also I found online about the World Bodybuilding Federation. Now that since the XFL has failed twice, I'm looking at the other major failure of Vince McMahon's career of trying to expand beyond wrestling. And you would see the way that he bought away IFBB competitors and tried to build them as body stars and basically made them out to be glorified wrestlers, where they weren't just there to, pose and to, be in the best shape and compete like that, but they'd have to actually have character gimmicks. And there was even a TV program for them where they would have to all act in character, do all these promos, and they'd have their own versions of valets where it'd be women dressed not too dissimilar for how the Princess Thoris is dressed right here. And that's not bodybuilding. It feels like some kind of glorified floor show, like what the most ardent critics of pro wrestling have to say. Go with the eyes. Now we're gonna go with a mouth here. That's where we are. Got some gems. She likes to, the people of Mars seem to be naked almost all the time, according to the source material. It seems that the only thing close to clothing that royalty wants to wear are all these intricately rendered gems. It almost makes her kind of look like a sexy Halloween costume version of Xerxes from 300. If you remember 300 and the way Xerxes seemed to pretty much wear a Speedo and all of these, all the jewels dangling off of him and the piercings in his nose and his eyebrows. Yes, there. What will you do, Leonidas? Will you bow? And all these things here, like these jewels that dangle off her breasts all the way and seem to go into the back of her arms here. Which is it seems like the artists that render Dejah Thoris with less jewelry seem to be the ones that, just want to get it over with. And notice that the ones that are the cover artists for the John Carter comics that are much more popular and have much bigger names seem to be the ones that do a lot more intricate work on the jewelry of Dejah's body. And those tend to be the guys that are, they can just go in, draw a cover, and make bank on it, like J. Scott Campbell or Frank Cho, which is why Kickstarter is now doing Dynamite Entertainment, which also owns the comic book license to Red Sonja, is now doing a lucrative Kickstarter campaign for the sake of Frank Cho's cover for a new Red Sonja comic. Mildred wants me to talking about Mr. McMahon, Vince McMahon. She says, don't forget to mention all the times his wife lost trying to be a senator. Yeah, there was and then the federal case the FBI had against the illegal purchase and distribution of steroids in the WWF, as well as the World Bodybuilding Federation. But so that wasn't included in the case as much. Now here we're going to go... There we go. Another little loose strand. And also, Lex Luger had been signed away from the WCW to go to, but he had a no-compete clause in his contract for 6 months. So Vince McMahon worked around that by making Lex Luger a competitor. He made him a figure in the World Bodybuilding Federation. And now with all the drug abuse of steroids and human growth hormone that Lex Luger did over the years, that's why now I see a recent photo of him and he looks like Wallace Shaw from The Princess Bride, who was also the T-Rex in Toy Story. Yeah, the president gave Mrs. McMahon a job in the administration probably because he's buddies with Vince. Well, why else would WrestleMania 23 just drop everything to have the president of the United States go in a match where whoever would lose would get their head shaved? And of course, Vince McMahon's the one who gets his head shaved. There we go, more of these little jangly gold strings. Soon they'll both be bankrupt. Well, between the natural decline that WWE's been going through, and then they've got everything going on with the second massive financial windfall of the XFL failing again. Yeah, that's who. All those people that Vince McMahon screwed over the years, between wrestlers who trusted him to his competition, thought they were in a fair marketplace. They're all probably just rubbing their palms and giggling like Ted Turner and Paul Heyman between the ECW and WCW. Wherever Ted Turner is right now is probably, oh, well, that's it. Looks like at the end of the day, I got the last laugh. And Paul Heyman, his snarling with glee. Paul Heyman doesn't really talk so much as snarl and scream. As Ace Ventura said, loser. Okay. I honestly think this is the one that's going to get me arrested, rendering Miss Thoris right here. And those in the chat, those watching right now, or later on, comment. If you're watching later on, comment below. If you're in the chat right now live, yay or nay, whether or not you think that she's this is a little too racy for me to be drawing. And on top of how scantily clad this character is, I also modeled the pose from a picture of Elle Macpherson when she posed in Playboy. So I think I'm really gonna. Well, Mildred seems to agree. Seems to think that this is not too racy. What she actually said is something I'm not going to repeat. But I think another thing I probably is now just come to mind. The artists that rendered Dejah Thoris with a lot more detail and all this jewelry and all this gold encrusted on her body. That's probably just a bunch of detail they add so that she won't look so scantily clad, so that she'll look less naked, with all these strings and jewelry hanging off of her, so it doesn't just look like she has pasties, a crown, and some gauntlets. Because they're nervous. They're understandably nervous, where any rendering of an attractive woman whatsoever seems to throw Twitter-obsessed weirdos into a tailspin, where this isn't a real person that you're looking at right here. It's a drawing of a person that doesn't exist. There is no Dejah Thoris or Red Sonja or Vampirella. So that's why it's very easy for an artist like Frank Cho to do a bunch of cover sketches openly mocking the easily offended and the social media activism that thinks yelling about the Spider-Woman cover where she's bent over on all fours is the same thing as the vile Access Hollywood tape. Frank Cho drawing, Red Sonja with her butt out is not the same as what our president said to Billy Bush on that truck. Oh, Christopher thinks that she's making him say "got milk." There's an obvious pun, but yeah. Let's go with point 3. Now that we're going to move down to her gauntlets. And everything I just said, Nick agrees. Well, her breasts are barely covered. In preparation for this, I watched a bunch of sword and sorcery films that I had recorded, but it turns out all of them were these cheapo kind of obvious Conan the Barbarian knockoffs that were made by Canon Films in the 80s, starting with the first in a series of 80s fantasy knockoffs of Conan called Gore, that were all based on a series of fantasy books from the 70s that were obviously knocking off Conan, also called Gore. And the love interest in the film was played by playmate Rebecca Ferrati. So that was that that doesn't really help to get my mind off of the scantily clad ladies in a fantasy setting. And the fact that they actually did sequels to it, one of them of which was featured in an episode of Mystery Science Theater 3000. But even strange, I honestly don't find it that strange that a Canon Films knockoff of Conan the Barbarian would feature a playmate as the sexy fantasy lady, but the same movie that has a playmate also has Oliver Reed and Jack Palance, one future Oscar winner and one past Oscar nominee. I'm not sure if Oliver Reed ever won, but yes, these two acclaimed elder statesman actors probably only doing the film for the combination of paycheck and the chance to be out in the desert with playmate walking around in leather straps over her chest and crotch with a big sword, as the women in stories like these are usually dressed. But oh yeah, it's well, in the chat right now, we've got Nick just quoted that Access Hollywood tape I was bringing up about our president was saying. Yeah, I could actually go ahead and go through with developing and then getting crowdfunding for that female Fantastic Four, the outer space swimsuit models exploring the sun comic idea of mine. And I would just say, this is meant to be a story, right? These aren't actual women flying around. Although now I do have the idea of putting it in as gags where it would be like a female flip on Fantastic Four, but they'll happen to look like Barbarella or like Dejah Thoris right here. And I'd make the joke that, yes, these are all women with, advanced degrees to be hired to do this privately funded space exploration, but that, they all did some, lingerie modeling in college. But they decided to, stick with getting their PhD in applied physics or in engineering instead of go into the runway stuff full time. Mildred says what I'm referring to, what I was just drawing here are called chesticles. That's a newer phrase I've heard, but like some internet meme that was making a joke about the lingerie scene from Star Trek Into Darkness, the scene where Alice Eve just strips to her bra and panties and stands there in front of Captain Kirk for no reason, for the reason because the movie written and directed by J.J. Abrams, obviously now using his power to get a good look at pretty ladies in lingerie that he never could in high school, like most of the guys in Hollywood. Joss Whedon, who was supposed to be such a great feminist and calling out all the horrible cliches in Hollywood that treat women like this or like that, or calling out the director of Jurassic World for being sexist because Whedon saw some out of context clip that offended him. But then it turns out he spent the 20 years between his wife divorcing him and when Buffy the Vampire Slayer premiered as a TV show to use his casting couch as a mail order service for cheating on his wife. So yeah, there's something. Yeah, you're so outspoken, you're so feminist, but there's never a cleavage or butt close-up of your lead actresses that you don't seem to enjoy. I mean, especially in the context of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, you seemed awfully leering whenever Black Widow was on screen. Okay, now I'm gonna go. We've got a bit here of her cape. Yeah, well, not really a cape. It's more like a veil. This is one of those cliche veil bikini bottoms you see in fantasy stories and paintings, like the slave swimsuit that Princess Leia wears, where she has the bottoms come with the front and back veil. I think there probably is some actual name for it in fashion, but I'm not a fashion designer, so I wouldn't know. But, yeah, to give you a further developments on this concept I was talking about of doing a sort of a cheesecake science fiction story, I thought of I would give it the title Intrepids. That's just a working title. That's just the first idea for a title for this comic, where there'd be, all these gorgeous ladies exploring the heart of the sun as a of course now having the idea that all four of them, yes, it would be, four. It would be this high concept sci-fi story with the science heroes, but it would be like a female flip on the Fantastic Four, except all four of them would have done some, lingerie modeling in college to pay their bills, to pay their tuition, but they decided to stick with getting their degrees instead of going into that full time. Like, I think I remember reading somewhere that Cindy Crawford originally was actually getting an engineering degree at Northwestern, and then went into getting modeling jobs to pay her tuition, but then decided to just drop out and stick to that full time. Now, where we're going to go? We're going to go back up. I think actually that did well. This is one of the... Once you get from 0.1 down, that's when you get to very thin, very frail lines, so you have to be careful and have a very light hand on that one. Now we're going to go, and 2.5 for her little here. And now, well, there. Down there. Yes, yes, these same four women once they invent a alloy as thin as any fabric that can withstand the temperatures of the sun, as well as nuclear fallout and even a point-blank shot to the chest from a missile silo or from a tank or from any other kind of projectile. This is the material they use to go and send the first manned or no womaned mission to the sun to further explore its depths and map the structure of the sun, not only for to further advance our knowledge of solar energy, but also to try and directly harness the sun itself as a renewable energy source. Something I think would have crossed the brilliant mind of Mr. Fantastic himself, Reed Richards, but probably is too close to solar, to preaching about solar energy and non-foreign oil for Marvel executives to want to touch. Then again, that sounds stupid in the day and age when Marvel is creating new characters named Snowflake and Safe Space, which almost seems like a petty swipe at the Comicsgate people that, yeah, I get the Comicsgate people, they're disgusting, but wasting time, a lot of time and money and on a petty little take that isn't really going to draw in. Is it really going to draw in an audience? Anybody new? I really don't think so. You got the people that are going to either be, if they go online or they go into a store, or when they could go into a store, they're probably going to be passing that up and looking for one of those dollar Marvel reprints of the Spider-Man stuff that looked like it was cool when it originally came out. Gonna move up a bit more now. Gonna go down. What do you all think about that? A quartet of brilliant female scientists who all happen to do some lingerie modeling in college. It's using an alloy that they privately engineered as the material for both their vehicle and their suits for the first manned mission to explore the depths of the sun. Sort of of course, it being privately funded, a sort of space-esque Elon Musk style figure. That would be their financier. Nick says, yeah, it's like the Marvel did that to make people mad. And, I think if you're going to be in the comics industry, shouldn't you be, making comics that are going to sell, especially when you're one of the big boys? Marvel's supposed to be one of the big corporate guys. Like, what's going to make money is supposed to be to paraphrase Vince Lombardi's quote about winning, how winning isn't everything, it's the only thing. I thought if you're the big corporate machine working under Disney, making money isn't just everything, it's the only thing. Instead of, figuratively flipping off, the alt-right. That's not going to generate any new customers, I don't think, and it's not going to solve any sort of problems of bringing new people in or maintaining an audience. Mildred suggested a title for these characters, but I don't think I can say that. Yeah, my first working title for this concept is to call it Intrepids, on the notion of something, and work of fiction in any fiction, any creative field where they take a common word or phrase or expression that's already well known and make that the title. Like you hear about the intrepid reporter or the intrepid explorers, or these intrepid scientists and engineers, and okay, like my real reference point for this, I think this is all in reaction to my wanting to develop the ability to draw attractive comic book women, combined with having just read the first 30 issues of Fantastic Four. So I think now it's a combination of wanting to do something in the tradition of those sexy fantasy or sci-fi female-led comics from the 90s, like what Michael Turner came up with Soulfire and Fathom, and the one that he drew but was not the creator of, Witchblade. This in that tradition, or the spy adventure Danger Girl, which was sort of like a super spy 90s comic version of Charlie's Angels that J. Scott Campbell came up with. So now, okay, that mixed with wanting to do, a big idea, just a giant, pinnacle, a giant, let's say, radioactive siren of creativity and imagination that was the initial Fantastic Four issues, where there was there's like they could not contain the amount of new concepts and stories and characters that were going on in what the FF was doing with its first. Well, I say the first 30 issues because that's the first 30 I read in that omnibus, but basically all of the 102 plus those annuals that the Stan Lee, Jack Kirby team were doing. Like Nick got me that one before, but one I bought for myself a couple years back was one of the Marvel Essential Fantastic Four prints. This is Volume 3, and this is the one. Volume 3 is the one that contains the first appearance of Galactus and Black Panther and the Inhumans and the Silver Surfer. That's the one where the high concept space exploration and other dimensions and new alien beings all really started to just explode out of the pencil of Jack Kirby, out of his basement in Long Island, and he was coming up with these these cosmic heralds that explored the spaceways looking for planets for its master to consume, because it was the embodiment of consumption. I do agree. I'm not sure if other writers since then have stuck to that notion, but I do like in the John Byrne years of writing and drawing Fantastic Four, he did come up with this notion that he established of Galactus as not being a malign entity, as being neither malign or benign, just almost the corporal form, the anthropomorphic. He's the anthropomorphized form of consumption. That he was there at the beginning of the universe and he'll be there till the universe is gone, of consumption. That kind of large concept, like, where the concept of how we're all born, I think it was in the book Cosmos, and something that other people who work in astrophysics or that involves the sciences of NASA will tell you that we're all born from a star. Every atom in every human body was once part of a star. So now it's a matter of, it would be a matter of getting back into the real roots of the human race. The roots of all life on Earth come from the sun. No sun, there'd be no life. Well, maybe returning to the sun would give us a renewed direction and a renewed source of how to live. They could. Well, we've got one title suggestion from Mildred's calling them solar power boobs. I don't think that would work. They could save the world from global warming. Well, that's I think the Ethan Van Sciver thugocracy would say that's too close to liberalism, and that I'm just being an SJW cuck by acknowledging the existence of climate change. I remember back in 2016, there were all those sightings in the news of clowns stalking people all over the world, clown sightings here and in England and all of that. I'd like there to be Greta Thunberg's sightings by insane conservative climate change deniers. You just have some guy you have a bunch of people who went to a Trump rally cheering him on, and then they come home, and then standing in the middle of the street is just Greta Thunberg standing there staring at them. Or somebody's hiking through the woods, some guy who, is his Second Amendment, he's out with a giant rifle to shoot bears, and he's going through the woods, and suddenly there's Greta Thunberg just standing there, staring. That'd be an idea. What happened? That'd be scarier to them than Pennywise the Clown from It. There we go. Now we're getting more. Well, one thing of trying to adopt more from having drawn my versions of J. Scott Campbell characters is his preference of line over brushwork, of being clear lined over shadow play. At least that's what his work looks like to me. I know there is use of spotting blacks and of heavy shadows, but there's still, even in that case, there still seems to be a preference of line work over it, or line work incorporated into what he does. There we go. She's got the pillow here for her knee and the pillow there for the back of her chair. Initially, the actual concept behind wanting to do sexy female-led comic was one of the first singles Pink Floyd did after their original frontman had left. There was a song of theirs from their second album called, of course, simply Set the Controls for the Heart of the Sun. I remember listening to that when I first started listening to Pink Floyd in high school, and that concept just stuck with me. If a space mission into the heart of the sun itself, how would that work? Now that being stuck in my head, that being left in my mind, combined with this, now it's almost like, oh, okay. Now I think I've got something. Accentuate the leg there. Got the sole of her foot. She's a princess, certainly, works hard to maintain her beautiful body, so gotta make sure she also has sexy feet. I'm not a foot guy, but it's, you got a character who's walking around being the princess of, as the text itself in the first John Carter book calls it, nude, silent Mars. You know the rules, never offend the TP, says Mildred. I don't know what the TP is. Even Nick doesn't know that one. Teacher's pet. Here's a... I don't want to offend the teacher's pet. First time I ever heard the phrase teacher's pet was a Disney Channel cartoon starring Nathan Lane as a talking dog who goes to school. Somehow a dog is magically turned into a dog boy, so his owner decides to enroll him in his school. And it was voiced by Nathan Lane. Probably because of his part in The Lion King. That was some like extension of Nathan Lane's Disney contract after The Lion King. They decided to give him a part in a... Okay, we'll give you a show. All right. That's not the strangest thing I've seen Nathan Lane do. I never watched it, but I did see ads for the O.J. Simpson miniseries, The American Crime Story, and Nathan Lane played the ex-Marine member of O.J.'s legal team, the one who was the one that directly questioned Mark Fuhrman and asked him if he had ever said the N-word before in his life, from one Marine to another. This ex-Marine criminal defense lawyer being played by the Timon from The Lion King. There was truly a surreal sight. There's the... I mean, what? Who was the stenographer there in the courtroom that day? Pumbaa. It's like Chris Rock. It's like the reminds me of the Chris Rock joke about Michael Jackson's second trial. How he showed up to court 20 minutes late and he showed up looking like Count Chocula. Who was the lawyer? Frankenberry. No. He said he showed up to court looking like Captain Crunch, and then asked him who was the lawyer. Frankenberry. No, Mildred, I do not love feet. I'm just drawing a scantily clad princess. You're gonna have to, a princess dressed like this with this kind of physique figure. You're gonna have to, even the feet have to look sexy. That's just a fact of how you draw these kind of comic book women. So. Another artist whose work I saw of render on who's drawn Dejah Thoris professionally, and I referenced was Arthur Adams. And knowing Arthur Adams, his fixation, attention to detail, it was just a simple waist up shot of her, but he really, really went overboard with making it look like she was wearing a bra made entirely out of coins and chains instead of, these caps right here. It's even a little simple cover like that looks like Arthur Adams took at least a day and a half to draw it. And I'd like to see, just as like an artistic experiment, to see him try to go the opposite direction of his style, where Arthur Adams is all obsessed with detail and 1,000 little lines and making everything exactly sharp. I'd like to see him try to go and draw like Frank Miller, like go and do something in the Sin City style or the Hellboy style, where it's all broad, heavy, high contrast black and white brushwork, where everything's in silhouette with little to no line. It's all chiaroscuro is the fancy pants artsy name for that style of art you see in the Hellboy and Sin City comics. Well, what was up? Nick brings up the O.J. Simpson miniseries and says it was good. Well, I didn't see it, so I'll take your word for it. And although it was nice to hear people, remember that Cuba Gooding Jr. is a good actor again, after all the years of making fun of him, understandably mocking him for winning an Oscar and then following it up with Boat Trip and Snow Dogs, to see him get positive reviews was nice. Even if he looks and sounds nothing like OJ. But then again, David Schwimmer from Friends looks and sounded nothing like Robert Kardashian, and he got a lot of acclaim. Yes, So Ross from Friends as Robert Kardashian, who wasn't even one of OJ's lawyers, but was involved. And of course, that was a way so that they could shoehorn, a bunch of scenes of the little Kardashian daughters. And Selma Blair, who actually was in the Hellboy movies, as I can't remember her character's name, but she was the lady who could throw fire in the Hellboy movies. Selma Blair was the Kardashian mom in the miniseries. Was Mildred wants me to acknowledge in the chat that Christopher loves feet. Okay, if you like feet, all right. It's I'm not mocking you. I'm just saying I'm not into feet that way. I mentioned Selma Blair, and Mildred brings up that she's from Bloomfield Hills, which is for those outside of the state, Bloomfield Hills is a very affluent part of. It's the real high society suburbs of the city. Like a lot of people who can name their family's fortune back to when the Dodges and the GMs were started. They live in Bloomfield Hills. That's why when I started reading Cerebus the Aardvark, and then I would drive through areas of Bloomfield Hills and would look at the houses that they have there in that part of town that are very old and very large, very intricately designed, and they look like the kind of elaborately rendered castle-looking buildings that are in all the backgrounds of Cerebus the Aardvark. All those almost post 17th century kind of kingdoms you see in the medieval Europe that always populate the world of Cerebus. That hotel that Cerebus lives in and populates his campaign in, and the high society storyline, and then goes back to and rules his religion out of in the church and state story arc. Or if you just go and right now and Google Cerebus High Society, that was the first long-term storyline in the Cerebus the Aardvark comic, and the paperback of it, the cover, is just this wraparound cover of this intricately rendered, fancy pants-looking hotel that most of the story takes place in, and that's what half the buildings in Bloomfield Hills look like, because that's how old money, likes their homes to look. They've maintained all those historical mansions. And Nick says that her armor looks good. Well, that's nice. So, well, armor, you mean, gauntlets and pasties. I think it's safe to say that these are pasties she's wearing. When it comes to rendering a character, the bust of a character like this, I try not to make them look too plastic. I know there's a lot of jokes I understand about the women in comics always look like the playmates with the breast implants, but I'm actually personally and artistically not fond of the busty kind where it looks like God would look down from the heavens and say, "I didn't make those." The joke Robin Williams made about you go to Vegas and the chests on women you see there, God will look down and say, "I didn't make those." And then he compared fake breasts to Nazis because they don't laugh, they don't dance, they just stand there. I'm walking here. I remember he joked about, I once went to Vegas and I saw a woman turn, but her implants are so big that they didn't turn with her. They just stayed in place and then turned. Trust me, they're painful. Now, Mildred's commenting on the chains coming off of Dejah Thoris's pasties, and she says that they're painful. Okay, I wouldn't know about wearing them, so... Although I have seen some cosplayers as Dejah Thoris, and no matter the body type, whether they really look at, like her or not, they always get the most attention because it's such a skimpy outfit. It's one of those costumes along with Starfire and Power Girl, or a Zatanna and Red Sonja that are the comic book women, the sexy comic book women designs that always, make the men drool and always want to, even if they're not professional, make the men want to stop and take a picture. Now we've got get her furniture out of the way. It's like Mars is like LA. There are no unattractive women on the planet, according to the John Carter of Mars books. I think that was that last Action Hero. Yeah, that was the one where the kid gets sucked into an Arnold movie and he's trying to explain to Arnold's character, this is all a movie. None of this is real. Everybody in this town has a 555 number and there are no unattractive women. Come on. This isn't real. No, this is California. And then the kid takes Arnold to a Blockbuster to show him, look, this is all just a movie, and they're played by this actor named Schwarzenegger. Look, I'll go to a Blockbuster and show you his other movies. And they go there, and the cashier is Angie Everhart. And then he goes to a big stand-up poster of Terminator 2, but it's Terminator 2 starring Sylvester Stallone. Which, okay, that's kind of funny. And there's also Arnold's line about, oh yeah, Stallone, that guy's great. But then, and how does Stallone repay Arnold? He makes a line in the movie Demolition Man of talking about the Schwarzenegger library, and then Sandra Bullock brings up, oh yes, the American Constitution was changed so that a foreigner could become the American president, and that led to President Schwarzenegger. Oh God, no. That's the Earth right up there. Yeah, you have to be in shape to pull off that costume at Comic-Con. Well, I think that's why the few women I've seen wear a Dejah Thoris getup are always the professionals. Like the first professional cosplayer I saw was at a MegaCon. That was one of the bigger ones, and that was the one I would go to annually when I was living in Orlando. And there was this girl called Alexia Jean Grey, as in, Jean Grey, the X-Men character. And always had the big photos of her and like Gwen's dressed as Gwen Stacy or as Jean Grey and Black Widow, because that was the first one I went to. I think was the summer that the first Avengers came out. So that's you would of course always at those conventions, if you want to sell, always go for what's the big trend, what's the hot new character. Like 2018, all the cons I went to, I was practically printing my own money with whatever kind of Black Panther renderings I would do. And sometimes it doesn't always last. And then I've noticed that since that halcyon year, since 2018, now the popularity and the bankability of my Black Panther work has slowed down, while my Deadpool work has maintained. I've done Deadpool. Any version of Deadpool always is making me bank, whether it's my new supply of spoofing the Deadpool 2 teaser trailer, where it's Deadpool as Bob Ross, the first trailer that was spoofing the joy of painting, or ones of Deadpool in Mickey Mouse garb to make fun of the Disney buyout of Fox, or the stuff of Deadpool as himself in his own costume. It's if I'm either just drawing my own illustration or recreating a cover or making some joke on another movie or superhero. Now, Deadpool is the news that stays news. And now you've got those two big movies, so it's not just within the comic book community. I can just get, a regular person to want to see something of that character, just somebody outside of the comic fandom. Well, Daredevil, not as much. You might get some people who, outside of the comic community, who know Daredevil from Netflix or further back, they might, oh yeah, that Ben Affleck movie, that one I hear was really stupid. But Spider-Man, he's a character, or you have to go a million miles to find somebody that doesn't know Spider-Man and wouldn't like some merchandise of the character. One more. Okay, so one more to do. And with that, we have ourselves a finished Dejah Thoris. And Mildred wants me to say thanks for the memories. Nick brings up the memories of Blockbuster. And on top of all that, I want to thank you all out there for watching. If you're a new viewer, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. And new and returning viewers, you can help out the channel by shopping in my online art store linked below. You can buy this illustration you see right here before it's posted for sale in my store by donating $30 to my store. That's the first item you see in the description below is a donations category. You can donate $5 or $10 or $25 or a custom amount if you want to help out the channel and help out my business. But if you don't want to buy this piece or buy any art, besides this, you can also, besides donating $30 to get this or donating another amount, you can also buy pen and ink illustrations like this for $25 a piece plus shipping and handling. Color drawings are available, $20 a piece plus shipping and handling. And you can commission an original illustration from me, pen and ink this size, at $50 a piece plus shipping and handling, or a color drawing like Miss Dejah Thoris right here. You can commission one at $25 a piece plus shipping and handling. Don't forget to also follow me on Twitter or Instagram, and you can help out the channel besides commissioning or illustrating or buying art by making a purchase from my Amazon wish list. You simply do that by going into the fourth and final link below in the description and get a piece of either equipment to expand the quality of my channel or instructional and reference material for me to grow artistically, as well as develop comic projects of my own, like a currently developing one of mine under the working title Intrepids, a sexy female science exploration of the depths of the sun, as well as a memoir horror comic of mine under the title Pain Machines, a 48-page psychological horror piece I'm working on and have finished pages for to show off. So until then, tomorrow night, 10 p.m. Eastern, 7 p.m. Pacific, I will be live again. What I will be drawing, you're going to have to come by for yourself and see. See you all tomorrow night. See you, Space Cowboy.